Welcome to the Treasury Update Podcast, Coffee Break Sessions, presented by Strategic Treasurer. The show where we cover foundational topics and core Treasury issues in about the same amount of time it takes you to drink your cup of coffee. I'll be your host, Jonathan, Media Production Specialist here at Strategic Treasurer, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. We are back with another coffee break session. Again, at the podcast table, we have Craig Jeffery, Managing Partner of Strategic Treasurer. Welcome back to the show.
It is good to be here, John.
Last time we talked about payment security assessments, and we're kind of continuing on that vein with what is a pen test? Could you walk us through that?
Sure. A pen test stands for penetration test. This is instead of an assessment where someone looks to see where we think the weaknesses are and what the remediation points are. It's a friendly adversary who's trying to penetrate your system. We think of this in the cyber world. I'm trying to gain access to your system or find a weak spot through your website, your email providers, uninterruptible power supply, any device that we can gain access to the system. And so a pen test is designed to understand the points of exposure you may have and inventory those items, to compromise some of those, to move laterally and gain more control. And there's different levels of pen tests, but that's, it's a friendly adversary actually testing the system to see how they can get through. And so there's certainly different levels of pen tests where you share more information with the pen tester instead of having them just hunt to find data. You may give them an inventory of what you have in websites and domains. You may even give them permission access into your network with certain rights, and they try to use those across to other areas, move laterally, gain and grant themselves more permission. That would be the assumption that there will be a compromise. How do we protect once someone's inside? So there's a range of different types of pen tests as well.
So having this done, what is the biggest improvement people will see in their company? Why is this important for cybersecurity?
Well, it's a realistic feedback, right? It's like your own. Hey, we're doing pretty good. How are we doing on security? We're doing pretty good. We use a vulnerability scan. We see where the points of weaknesses are. We tap them down. Pretty good. But when you have an adversary who's trying to get in, you're paying them. They're trying to get in or move laterally. They will try different things. And that real test will show you where your weaknesses are. And some of those, you may be like, you identified something that we shouldn't have had, or, but it always finds areas where you can lock some of those things down. And I can share some examples that we've had over time, they're a little embarrassing when they happen. But if you don't have someone testing to try to compromise things or to find activities, you won't see them. And there's lots of examples.
Could you walk us through one of them?
Well, one example earlier, the first time we did a pen test, this was multiple years ago, the pen test company had come back and said, well, we didn't break through your one of your web access sites, right, where we might be maintaining our websites, right? Not client data, but a website. Because once you gain access, you can do more. It's like, okay, we were able to find your IDs, and then we did, it was more than 4 million attempts, brute force attempts, to get through, to gain control of our website. And I was like, you didn't get through? It's like, no, we only had time for 4 million attempts, like 4 million attempts. And so the issue is, if someone's coming in, you want to block them after 5, 8, or 10 times, right? So if someone's making a mistake, they're not going to just keep brute forcing it. And so it needs to block it. You can extinguish those IP domains if someone's coming in trying to brute force their way into the system. You certainly shouldn't let them just run amok and do millions of tests. And they were like, yeah, we run this. We timed it for after hours when you wouldn't notice a system performance issue, and they'd run it at night until morning. Then they would stop it, and then they would run it again. And so it was just this constant attack. And so we set up different parameters. We set up, other controls that would block and extinguish these attacks so that wouldn't be an issue. And then you also want to make it so that certain IDs aren't even discoverable. So they're not just like, okay, I have the ID and I want to brute force it. It's like, I don't have the ID. I don't even have the first part of it. Even if they get the first part, you certainly don't want them to be able to test it eternally.
Do you get a couple million emails saying, failed login attempt?
Well, at the time we weren't having that provide notifications. And so now all of those things we have ongoing survey monitoring, but those are the things where you're keeping current on items And it's another way of finding different points of weaknesses. So that's part of a suite of how you design your system. What do you do with vulnerability scanning? Like we do constant vulnerability scanning, which points out weaknesses, and we repair and fix those. We have a third party that comes in for Pentest to look at things. We also use a provider that does constant monitoring, looking at our infrastructure, that provides another view. It's like a continual pen test and weakness scanning from another source. So we've got 3 areas that we're looking at our information on a continual basis.
On LinkedIn the other day, I saw this really funny meme that was it was like Books A Million or somewhere like that, and they had a bunch of ink pens out for sale, and there was a sign in front of it that said "No pen testing." So who performs the pen tests?
So a cyber pen test, there's many companies that do this. Many of them are fairly small. They're boutique firms that do cyber testing and cybersecurity. There's also other larger ones that do pen testing. There's some more automated methods of pen testing that are growing up and existing, but there's quite a few companies that provide pen tests and a variety of different penetration tests that they can run. So that's the regular pen test.
What's the difference for getting a pen test generally for your company versus specific to payments?
So a payment pen test is definitely specific to payments. You're trying to find information about the banking structure, who are the points of contact, what controls are in place, can access be secured from any portal, any payment system, any generating system. So the focus is compromising the payment systems and payment-related and banking data. So that's a different area of focus. One is the overall infrastructure from any point, just general cyber defense, the perimeter, the interior, and payment pen test is focused on, testing the payment process and payment-related information that needs to be protected and secured.
I'm guessing they would use the general information in a payment pen test to try and gain access specifically for payments.
Sure. So if I gain information, who are your bankers, who are the points of contact, I find out what your bank account numbers are. I further determine what controls you have in place. Now I have more information. Now I can try to remove controls, or I can try to take advantage of where you don't have the right structure. If I can see that you're not reconciling things or identifying them quickly, there's other ways to provide some kind of compromise of data, compromise of access, or even movement of funds, from that company.
Any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience?
As long as they don't think that a pen test is related to a pen, it relates to penetration of a system or a payment process, then we're good.
All right. Well, thank you. And to our listeners, remember to tune back in every first and third Thursday of the month for another coffee break session.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.